My boss humiliated me in front of everyone by calling me background noise during a meeting and then tried to sabotage my entire career. So I slammed the door on my way out and made sure every skeleton in his closet was dragged into the light. A year later, the board offered me his old job after he was forced out, and I didn't even bother replying to their email. My former supervisor once remarked that my vocal delivery made him feel as though he was being touched by every infamous murderer in history, and somehow, I was the one who received a formal reprimand. Everyone had claimed that securing employment would transform my life. They weren't mistaken, just not for the reasons they had anticipated. Day 1, corporate orientation. A kombucha refrigerator, posters promoting collaboration over competition on every wall. You know the kind. A company that presented itself as a family right before reducing your benefits. Then came Mr. Tolan, my manager. Mid-40s, an expensive timepiece, and hair that appeared styled with an ego-powered blow-dryer. Fast forward to our initial team gathering. Mr. Tolan expressed a desire for me to present an idea, offering a fresh, newcomer's viewpoint. I viewed this as a significant chance, so I dedicated 50 hours to my presentation. During the meeting, I was convinced I was excelling. I observed people nodding and smiling. But then Mr. Tolan interrupted me. Thank you for that background noise. Now, does anyone who isn't still in infancy have any actual ideas? I recall feeling utterly devastated. He was the one who had requested my presentation. Why would he humiliate me? I approached Human Resources to inquire about Mr. Tolan, but instead of assistance, I was informed that I was new and would soon adapt to the company's ethos. I wished to assert myself, but given the current job market, I knew I couldn't risk losing my position. So I endured it. This continued until the Q3 pitch initiative. I invested over 100 hours in my presentation, and this time, I more than excelled. Even the vice presidents were nodding and looking at me as if I had stumbled upon something significant. Then Tolan pulled me aside and stated, I appreciate you, Grace, but when you speak, it feels like I'm being caressed by every serial killer who has ever lived simultaneously. He then smiled at me as if he had just offered a compliment. I blinked at him and lodged a formal complaint the following day. I was uncertain of the outcome, but what I never expected was that by the next week, my performance evaluations had plummeted. Suddenly, I was no longer a team player. My tone was deemed abrasive, and responding to my last email was now an HR infraction. Colleagues began to ignore me. One woman who had once whispered, Tolan gives me the creeps, now labeled me toxic. Even my friends distanced themselves. Then HR declared my attire was distracting. I wore turtlenecks. I began to second-guess everything, so I started documenting all emails, comments, and passive-aggressive sticky notes. Then a client terminated our largest contract. The office was practically in turmoil for about a day, attempting to ascertain who was responsible. And guess who bore the blame? Not the account manager, but rather me. Tolan informed HR that I had destroyed morale and used my complaint as evidence that I had been resentful since day one. I was suspended pending investigation. It was then that it became clear, losing the client wasn't some genuine error by an account manager. It was a deliberate scheme. We had just hired Tolan's nephew, whose job description was suspiciously similar to mine. I remember feeling heartbroken, and that night, I posted a general LinkedIn update seeking new opportunities, emphasizing personal development over ego. Within hours, a former employee from our company messaged me. He requested to meet for coffee, and when we did, he provided me with a USB drive containing chat logs of Tolan referring to women as hormonal PR risks and too shrill to promote. He had attempted to report it once, and they had also forced him out. So he and I constructed something together, a discreet dossier. No lawsuits, just the unvarnished truth about Tolan. I believe Tolan perhaps caught wind of our activities because he contacted me one day, expressing a desire to clear the air. He claimed he missed my energy and suggested that if I dropped the matter, perhaps I could return. I told him I would consider it, but I did not. Instead, the day I returned, I scheduled an all-hands meeting. With a crowded room, Tolan delivered as usual, we're a family address, right on cue. I raised my hand, walked to the front, and handed HR a sealed, time-stamped, indexed folder of meticulously organized evidence. Then I played a recording. When you speak, it feels like I'm being touched by every serial killer who ever lived. Silence. Someone choked on water. It seems my voice terrifies you, I stated. Perhaps someone else should leave the meetings. I walked out. No applause, just doors closing. 3 months later, someone sent me a mass email. Tolan had been reassigned internally. I did not reply. A week later, HR contacted me. We'd like to talk, but this time, they didn't sound angry. They sounded apprehensive. Her voice had that slight tremor of someone who had just realized they were on the wrong side of history. That's when things became truly intriguing. I agreed to meet with Lillian at a coffee shop off Main Street, not the office. There was no way I was walking back into that place without knowing what they desired. I selected a spot near the window so I could observe her arrival. I arrived 15 minutes early and ordered the largest coffee they had. My nerves were frayed, and I hadn't slept well since the entire ordeal began. The pungent aroma of freshly ground beans filled the air as I watched people hurry past outside, all of them blissfully unaware of the knot in my stomach. Lillian appeared 5 minutes late, looking nothing like her usual polished self. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of her customary perfect bob. No blazer with power shoulders either, just a wrinkled cardigan. She scanned the coffee shop as if she feared being followed. That's when I realized something was seriously amiss. Her eyes, typically self-assured and direct, darted nervously around the room before settling on me. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the chair opposite me. She didn't order anything, just clutched her purse as if it contained state secrets. "This isn't an official HR meeting." I nodded but remained silent. I had learned my lesson about giving people leeway to incriminate me. The last time I had been open and honest with HR, it had cost me my job and nearly my sanity. "Your documentation was very thorough," she continued, lowering her voice. "Do you have more?" That caught me off guard. I anticipated threats, perhaps a settlement offer with a non-disclosure agreement attached, not this. Her question hung in the air between us, unexpected and laden with implications. "Why do you ask?" I kept my expression neutral, taking a slow sip of my coffee. The caffeine did nothing to calm my racing heart. Lillian glanced around again before leaning forward. After he left, things started happening. Other employees came forward with similar experiences, not just with Tolan. "It's bigger than we initially thought." I almost chuckled. Initially thought. They had buried my complaint like a cat covers its waste. For weeks, I had documented every inappropriate comment, every instance of being interrupted in meetings, every time Tolan had claimed credit for my work. I had presented HR with a meticulous record, only to be told I was misinterpreting things or being too sensitive. "The company is conducting an internal ethics audit," she explained. "We'd like your input as part of this process." Now I did laugh. I couldn't help it. The notion that they wanted my assistance after pushing me out was too rich. The sound was harsh, even to my own ears, drawing glances from nearby tables. "Let me get this straight. You want me to help the company that treated me like garbage? The same company that allowed Tolan to create a hostile work environment and then punished me for reporting it." Lillian had the decency to appear uncomfortable. Her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her purse, and a faint flush crept up her neck. "I understand your hesitation, but this is an opportunity to create real change." "What's truly happening, Lillian?" I inquired. Because this sudden concern for ethics seems rather convenient. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms defensively. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone and showed me a Medium post. My stomach dropped when I saw the title, "The Serial Killer Voice: How Meridian Solutions Silences Women." It had over 20,000 claps. The featured image was a silhouette of a woman with tape over her mouth, the Meridian logo watermarked in the background. "Someone posted this 3 weeks ago," she said. "It doesn't name you specifically, but it describes your situation in detail. Since then, we've received dozens of internal reports about similar misconduct." I hadn't written it, but I had a pretty good idea who did. Roy had been my only ally at Meridian. He'd helped me retrieve emails that Tolan had deleted from the server, emails that proved my ideas had been stolen. Roy had mentioned wanting to share our findings more broadly. I told him I wasn't ready for that kind of public exposure. Guess he decided to take matters into his own hands. "The board is concerned about potential PR damage," Lillian admitted. "But some of us genuinely want to improve the culture. We can offer you a consulting fee to review our policies and provide recommendations. It would require an NDA for any new information you access." There it was, the true reason for the meeting. They weren't afraid of doing the right thing. They were afraid of negative publicity. I studied Lillian's face, attempting to determine if she was one of the sincere ones or merely performing damage control. The dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping well either. "I'll think about it," I told her, which was corporate jargon for not a chance in hell. After Lillian departed, I called Roy. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been anticipating my call. "Did you write that Medium post?" I asked without preamble. "They contacted you, didn't they?" He sounded smug. "Good. They should be scared. You should have told me," I said. "I'm the one who has to deal with the repercussions." I paced my apartment, phone pressed to my ear, a mixture of anger and grudging appreciation warring within me. "I altered enough details to keep you anonymous," he argued. "Besides, it worked. They're finally taking this seriously." He wasn't wrong, but something about the entire situation felt off. Why would Meridian suddenly care about rectifying their toxic culture? The company had weathered bad press before. There had to be more to it. I decided to conduct some investigation before responding to Lillian. I reached out to Anna, my former team member, who had witnessed much of Tolan's behavior but remained silent when HR questioned her, figuring she might possess inside information. I sent her a carefully worded text. To my surprise, she agreed to meet. We chose a park bench far from the office, surrounded by enough ambient noise to obscure our conversation. "I'm sorry about how everything went down," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I was scared for my job." She looked thinner than I remembered, her shoulders hunched forward as if bearing an invisible burden. I nodded, but didn't offer absolution. She hadn't supported me when it mattered. The memory of sitting alone in that HR meeting with Anna's, I didn't notice anything unusual echoing in my ears, was still too fresh. "What's happening at Meridian now?" I asked. Anna glanced around nervously. "It's chaos. After that Medium article, everyone's paranoid. They've hired some external HR consultant to interview staff. Tolan's been moved to a different department, but he still has influence." She lowered her voice further. "He's been telling people you had a vendetta against him because he rejected your advances." I felt my blood pressure surge. Typical. When men can't attack your work, they attack your character. And his nephew, Samuel, is still there, acting like he owns the place now. She twisted her hands in her lap. But that's not all. They're reviewing old HR complaints, trying to identify potential problems before they become public. That caught my attention. Old complaints? Like mine. Older. From before you started. She lowered her voice. I overheard Lillian talking to the consultant. Apparently, there were multiple complaints about Tolan and others that were handled quietly, buried. "You mean?" Anna nodded. "And not just by Lillian. The vice president of operations, Teresa Wilson, personally intervened in some cases." She glanced over her shoulder as if Teresa might materialize behind us. "People are terrified of her. She has this way of making problems and people disappear." Teresa Wilson. I'd only seen her from a distance at company meetings, always impeccably dressed, with a reputation for being brilliant but ruthless. She'd been with Meridian for over 15 years, working her way up from entry level. Her corner office overlooked the city, a testament to her power within the company. Why would she do that? I wondered aloud. Anna shrugged. "Office politics. Protecting the company image." "I don't know. But whatever's happening now has her spooked. She's been closed in her office with the legal team all week." I thanked Anna for the information and headed home, my mind racing. If Meridian was suddenly concerned about old complaints, there must be something serious in their history, something they desperately wanted to keep hidden. I decided to accept Lillian's offer, but not for the reason she hoped. This was my chance to uncover what they were truly concealing. As I walked home through the park, fallen leaves crunching beneath my feet, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since being forced out of Meridian. The next day, I emailed Lillian, agreeing to assist with their ethics audit. She responded within minutes, attaching a consulting agreement and NDA. The consulting fee was surprisingly generous. Clearly, they were motivated to keep me silent. 5 figures for 2 weeks of work, more than I'd earned in 2 months at Meridian. I signed the NDA but added a handwritten note. This agreement does not cover any information or documentation I collected prior to signing. A small legal loophole, but potentially important. I'd learned enough about corporate tactics to understand the significance of creating an escape route. 2 days later, I was back at Meridian, this time with a visitor badge and limited access to their HR files. The familiar scent of industrial carpet cleaner and stale coffee greeted me as I walked through the lobby. My former colleagues either avoided eye contact or stared openly, whispering as I passed. Lillian set me up in a small conference room with a laptop connected to their system. "We'd like you to review these cases and identify patterns of problematic behavior," she explained, showing me a folder of anonymized complaints. "Your perspective as a former employee could be valuable." I nodded, playing along. "I'll need access to the original files too, not just the anonymized versions. Context matters." Lillian hesitated. "Those files contain confidential information." "I've signed your NDA," I reminded her. "And you want my help, right? I need to see the full picture." After some back-and-forth negotiation and a call to legal, she reluctantly agreed, granting me slightly higher-level access before leaving me alone with the files. As soon as the door closed, I began searching, not just for Tolan's name, but for patterns across departments and years. What I discovered was worse than I expected. Dozens of complaints similar to mine, dating back nearly a decade. Women reporting inappropriate comments, being overlooked for promotions, having their ideas stolen. Men reporting retaliation when they supported female colleagues. All of them resolved with the same note: no action required at this time. The clinical dismissal of so many legitimate concerns made my stomach churn. And there was a pattern to who handled these complaints. Any case involving a manager level or above was reviewed personally by Teresa Wilson, regardless of which department it originated from. That wasn't standard procedure for a vice president of operations. She was deliberately intercepting these complaints. I delved deeper, cross-referencing names and dates. That's when I found it. A complaint from 8 years ago filed by a woman named Rebecca Chun against Franklin Mills, the current CFO. The details were sickeningly familiar. Inappropriate comments, professional sabotage, eventual termination for performance issues. Rebecca had documented everything meticulously, just as I had. Her file included emails, witness statements, even a recording. But her complaint had been closed with a note from Teresa, handled internally. No further action required. The recording was particularly damning. Mills clearly telling Rebecca that her attitude problem would vanish if she learned to be more agreeable to certain requests. I searched for Rebecca online and found her LinkedIn profile. She had left Meridian and the industry entirely, now managing a small bookstore in a different state. Her experience had literally driven her out of her profession. Her About section contained a quote about finding peace away from corporate culture. Reading between the lines, I could sense the trauma that had compelled her to abandon her career. I was so engrossed in my research that I didn't notice someone entering the conference room until they spoke. "Finding anything interesting?" I jumped, quickly minimizing the window. Teresa Wilson stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She was exactly as I remembered. Perfectly tailored suit, not a hair out of place, radiating cold authority. Her presence seemed to lower the temperature in the room by several degrees. "Just reviewing the files Lillian assigned me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Teresa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Lillian mentioned you were helping with our audit. Very generous of you, considering the circumstances." She walked into the room and sat across from me, her movements deliberate and controlled. I always make a point of knowing who's accessing our confidential files. A security alert went to my phone when you opened certain historical cases. My heart raced. I was caught. But instead of retreating, I decided to go on the offensive. Like Rebecca Chen's complaint against Franklin Mills? I asked. If she was surprised, she didn't show it. That situation was handled appropriately given the circumstances. Was it? I countered. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been systematically protecting abusive executives for years. Teresa's expression hardened. You don't understand corporate realities. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good of the company. The greater good. I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. You mean protecting men like Tolan and Mills while destroying women's careers? I protected the company, she corrected. Do you have any idea what a public scandal would do to Meridian's stock price? How many jobs would be lost? Sometimes sacrifices are necessary. And Rebecca Chun was one of those sacrifices. Teresa shrugged, a small, elegant movement. She was compensated appropriately with a settlement and an NDA. I guess that's standard practice. I leaned forward. Just like the agreement you signed yesterday, which I should remind you prevents you from discussing anything you find here. She was right, technically, but I created that loophole for a reason. I said nothing, just held her gaze. The tension between us was palpable, like two predators circling each other. I think we're done for today, Teresa finally said, standing. Lillian will contact you about next steps. After she left, I quickly copied several key files to a flash drive before logging out. I had a feeling my access would be revoked by morning. My hands trembled slightly as I slipped the drive into my pocket, half expecting security to burst through the door. I was right. The next day, Lillian called to inform me that they were restructuring the audit process and wouldn't need my help after all. They'd still honor the consulting fee, of course. How generous. I spent the next week reviewing the files I'd taken and researching the people involved. Rebecca Chin wasn't the only one. There were at least 7 similar cases, all involving high-level executives, all handled personally by Teresa. Some had received settlements. Others had simply vanished from the company with no explanation. I needed more information, and I knew just who to ask. Roy agreed to meet me at his apartment, away from potentially prying eyes. His place resembled a command center, with multiple monitors displaying what appeared to be Meridian's internal communications. Empty energy drink cans and takeout containers suggested he'd been at this for days. How are you still accessing their systems? I asked, impressed despite myself. He grinned. I maintained limited access to monitor some security protocols I implemented before I left. They never properly revoked all my credentials. Isn't that illegal? Technically, I'm just checking my work. Their security team should have done a better job with offboarding procedures. He turned to his computer. What are you looking for? Information on Teresa Wilson and her handling of harassment complaints. Specifically, anything related to Rebecca Chun and Franklin Mills. Roy whistled. You're aiming high. Mills is practically untouchable. He's been with the company since the beginning. So has Teresa, I pointed out. There's some connection there. I need to understand what it is. He typed rapidly, navigating through folders and databases. Here's something interesting. 8 years ago, right after the Chun complaint, Teresa was promoted to vice president. Before that, she was just a senior director. That timing can't be coincidental, I said, leaning closer to the screen. Can you find any communication between her and Mills from that period? More typing. Their official emails are too clean. They're careful. But he switched to another program. The company used to have an internal messaging system before they switched to Slack. The old data is still on their servers, just archived. After several minutes of searching, he found what we were looking for. Messages between Teresa and Mills dated the week of Rebecca's complaint. Mills, need this handled quietly. Board meeting next week. Teresa, already on it. She'll take the package. Mills, make sure the NDA is airtight. Can't have this getting out before the merger. Teresa, trust me. By next week, this will be forgotten. Mills, I won't forget who helped me. The VP position is yours after the merger goes through. I sat back, processing what I had just read. They buried Rebecca's complaint because of a merger. Roy nodded grimly. Meridian acquired Tech Fusion that year. It was their biggest deal ever, nearly doubled the company's value. Mills was the architect of that deal, and Teresa got her promotion for keeping Rebecca quiet. I finished. They sacrificed her career for a business deal. Welcome to corporate America, Roy said bitterly, where people are just collateral damage in the pursuit of profit. He rubbed his eyes, the glow from the monitors highlighting the exhaustion on his face. I thought about all the other complaints Teresa had buried over the years. How many careers had been destroyed to protect Meridian's image and stock price? How many people had been silenced with NDAs and settlements? The faces of those employees, mostly women, mostly young, flashed through my mind. All of them had trusted the system to protect them, just as I had. We need to find these people, I decided. All the ones who were forced out like we were. They must have their own documentation, their own stories. And do what? Roy asked. They've all signed NDAs. We can't go public with this. Maybe not publicly, I said slowly, an idea forming. But internally, that's a different story. Over the next 2 weeks, Roy and I tracked down as many former employees as we could find. Some refused to speak with us, too traumatized or bound by their NDAs. Others were willing to share their experiences off the record. A few, like Rebecca, had kept their own documentation despite the settlements. We created a secure online repository where people could anonymously upload their evidence, emails, recordings, performance reviews that suddenly plummeted after they filed complaints. The pattern was undeniable and damning. Each piece of evidence we collected strengthened our case, building a mosaic of systematic abuse and cover-ups that spanned years. Meanwhile, I continued my consulting with Meridian, now meeting with Lillian weekly at the coffee shop. I fed her just enough information to keep her thinking I was helping, while gathering intelligence on the company's current damage control efforts. Each time we met, she looked more stressed, the weight of what she was discovering clearly taking its toll. The board is getting impatient, she told me during one meeting. They want this wrapped up before the quarterly earnings call. These things take time, I said. Cultural problems don't develop overnight, and they can't be fixed overnight either. She nodded, looking exhausted. Teresa is pushing for a quick resolution. Just update the policies, issue a statement, and move on. Is that what happened with Rebecca Chun? I asked innocently. Lillian froze. How do you know that name? It came up in my research, I said vaguely. Her case seems relevant to the current situation. That case was resolved years ago, Lillian said carefully. It's not part of the current audit. Maybe it should be. Patterns of behavior are important to identify, right? She changed the subject quickly after that, but I'd planted the seed. Lillian wasn't foolish. She had to know there was more going on than a simple ethics audit. A few days later, Roy called me in a panic. They know, he said without preamble. They've discovered the security breach. They're locking down all their systems. Did they trace it to you? I asked, immediately concerned. I don't think so, but they know someone's been accessing old files. They've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. This was moving faster than I'd anticipated. We had gathered substantial evidence, but I wasn't sure if it was enough. We needed something more concrete, something that couldn't be explained away or buried again. That's when I remembered something Anna had mentioned. Teresa had been meeting with the legal team regularly. What if they were preparing new NDAs, new settlements to keep this quiet? I called Anna, who still felt guilty enough about her earlier betrayal to help me. Can you check Teresa's calendar? I need to know who she's meeting with this week. Anna called back an hour later. She has a meeting with legal tomorrow morning before the board meeting. And guess who else is invited? Franklin Mills and 3 other executives who've had complaints filed against them. They're circling the wagons, I realized, getting their stories straight before the board meeting. There's more, Anna said, her voice dropping. Samuel, Tolan's nephew, he's been promoted to my team lead. He told us today that there might be restructuring coming. I think they're planning to clean house, get rid of anyone who might talk. I thanked her for the information and immediately called Roy. We need to move now, I told him. Tomorrow morning, before the board meeting. The repository isn't complete, he objected. We're still missing. We don't have time. I cut him off. They're already planning to silence people and destroy evidence. It has to be tomorrow. We stayed up all night finalizing our plan. By morning, we had everything ready. Roy had created a special email distribution list that included every current Meridian employee, from the CEO down to the newest intern. I had prepared a simple message with a link to our secure repository of evidence. At 8:30 a.m., precisely when Teresa's meeting with legal was scheduled to commence, we sent the email from an anonymous account. Before today's board meeting, you should know what Meridian has been hiding. No NDAs were violated in the collection of this information. The link led to our repository, organized by date and executive name. Mills had the most extensive section, followed closely by Tolan. Each case included the original complaint, evidence of how it was suppressed, and the subsequent retaliation against the employee who reported it. We included a special section on Teresa Wilson, documenting her systematic protection of abusive executives in exchange for career advancement. The messages about her promotion following the Rebecca Chin case were highlighted prominently. Within minutes, my phone exploded with text from Anna. OMG, what did you do? Everyone's reading it. Teresa just ran out of her meeting. Mills looks like he's having a stroke. Security is trying to block the link on company devices, but people are using their phones. I turned my phone off and tried to calm my racing heart. There was no going back now. Either this would work, or I'd be facing a lawsuit that would bankrupt me for life. I thought about Rebecca Chun, driven from her career, about Roy, forced out for trying to do the right thing, about all the others whose lives had been damaged while Teresa and Mills prospered. Worth it, I decided. 3 hours later, I turned my phone back on to find dozens of missed calls and messages. Most were from Lillian, growing increasingly frantic. Please call me immediately. The board is demanding answers. Teresa is saying you stole confidential files. We need to talk before this escalates further. The most recent message, sent just 20 minutes ago, was different. Board meeting just ended. Teresa and Mills have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. External counsel has been retained. Please call me. This is not about punishing you. We need your help to fix this properly. I didn't call her back immediately. Instead, I checked social media. Nothing public yet. The company was keeping this internal for now, but it was only a matter of time before someone leaked it to the press. Roy called next. It worked, he said, sounding stunned. A friend still at Meridian says the board is in complete damage control mode. They've called in an outside law firm to conduct an independent investigation. What about retaliation? I asked. Anna mentioned restructuring. That's on hold. The board has ordered no personnel changes until the investigation is complete. I finally called Lillian back. She sounded simultaneously exhausted and relieved. The board has seen everything, she told me. They've placed Teresa, Mills, and 3 other executives on leave. They want to meet with you, not to threaten or silence you, but to understand how this was allowed to happen for so long. And Tolan? I asked. Terminated, effective immediately, along with his nephew. There was a hint of satisfaction in her voice. The board is extremely concerned about potential liability. They're prepared to make things right with everyone affected. No more NDAs? I pressed. No more secret settlements? That's part of what they want to discuss with you. They're talking about a complete overhaul of how harassment complaints are handled. I agreed to meet with the board the following week. In the meantime, more former employees came forward, adding their experiences to our repository. The trickle became a flood as people realized they weren't alone, that their experiences were part of a pattern. Rebecca Chin called me after someone forwarded her the link. I thought I was crazy, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For years, I've blamed myself for not fighting harder, for taking the settlement and walking away. You did what you had to do, I told her. We all did. Not you, she said. You fought back. You exposed them. Not alone, I reminded her. And not without help from people like you who documented everything. The day before my meeting with the board, Lillian called with an update. Teresa resigned this morning. Mills is fighting it, claiming he did nothing wrong, but the evidence is overwhelming. The external investigation has already confirmed most of what was in your repository. And the other executives? I asked. 2 have resigned. One is cooperating with the investigation, providing information about other incidents we didn't know about. She paused. It goes deeper than we thought. There's a whole network of people who enabled this behavior. I wasn't surprised. Systems like this don't persist without widespread complicity. The board wants to offer you your job back, Lillian continued, with a promotion and back pay for the time you were suspended. I laughed. I don't think that's a good idea for anyone involved. I figured you'd say that. They're prepared to offer a settlement instead, no NDA required. They just want your input on rebuilding the reporting system. I thought about it. Returning to Meridian was out of the question, but helping to fix the broken system that had harmed so many people, that might be worth doing. I'll consider it, I told her. But I have conditions. Name them. First, everyone who was forced out after filing a complaint gets the same offer, compensation with no NDA. Second, the new reporting system has to be completely independent from executive influence. And third, I want Rebecca Chin involved in designing it. She's been on the other side of this. Her perspective is valuable. Lillian was quiet for a moment. I'll take these to the board, but off the record, I think they'll agree to all of it. They're terrified of this going public. After I hung up, I sat on my couch, trying to process everything that had transpired. My phone buzzed with a text from Roy. We did it. We had, but it didn't feel like a victory celebration was in order. Too many people had been hurt along the way. The best we could hope for was that it wouldn't happen again, at least not at Meridian. The next morning, as I prepared for my meeting with the board, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line simply read, "Thank you." It contained a photo of a group of women and men, former and current Meridian employees, all raising coffee mugs toward the camera. The message read, "Our voices matter because of you. No more serial killer voices. Just humans being heard." I smiled and saved the photo. Then I grabbed my notes and headed out the door. There was still work to do. I headed to the board meeting with a strange mix of apprehension and hope in my stomach. The Meridian headquarters looked exactly the same from the outside, all glass and steel, attempting to appear important. But inside, the energy was completely different. People were whispering in corners. The usual corporate zombie shuffle had been replaced with actual human emotions, mostly shock and confusion. I spotted Anna by the coffee machine, and she gave me a small thumbs up when no one was looking. The boardroom was intimidating as hell, one of those long tables that screams, "Important people sit here." 5 board members were waiting, all in various stages of panic disguised as professionalism. The CEO, Harold Winters, looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect suit was slightly wrinkled, and his eyes had that bloodshot quality of someone whose career was flashing before his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to an empty chair. No handshake, smart move on his part. I sat down and placed my folder of notes on the table. I'd prepared extensively, even practiced what I'd say in my bathroom mirror, like I was prepping for a job interview. The irony wasn't lost on me. "We've reviewed all the documentation," Harold continued, his voice carefully neutral. "The board has unanimously voted to terminate Teresa Wilson and Franklin Mills, effective immediately." I nodded, but didn't celebrate. This wasn't about taking down individuals. It was about dismantling the system. "We'd like to discuss your conditions," he said, glancing at some notes. "Lillian shared your requests with us. For the next 2 hours, we hammered out details. They agreed to contact everyone who had been forced out after filing complaints. No NDAs would be required for any settlements. They'd create an independent reporting system for harassment claims, with oversight from an external ethics committee. And yes, they'd hire Rebecca Chin as a consultant to help design it. "We want to make this right," Harold insisted, leaning forward with practiced sincerity. "Meridian has committed to creating a safe workplace for everyone." I almost laughed. These same people had sat in the same room for years while Teresa and Mills destroyed careers. Now they were suddenly champions of workplace safety. But I kept my face neutral. This wasn't about their redemption story. It was about protecting future employees. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out a document I had prepared. "I want a public statement. Not a vague press release about personnel changes or recommitting to values. A real acknowledgement of what happened and how it was allowed to continue for so long." The board members exchanged nervous glances. Their lawyer, a woman with a severe bob and glasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent, cleared her throat. "That presents some liability concerns," she said carefully. "Everything presents liability concerns," I countered. "But covering things up is what got you here in the first place." Harold rubbed his temples. "We'll work on a statement. Something substantive, but carefully worded." I pushed my chair back. "Then I think we're done here." As I walked out, Lillian caught up with me by the elevators. "That went better than expected," she said quietly. "We'll see," I replied. "Words are easy. Follow through is hard." She nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have done more when you first came to me." I appreciated the apology, but it didn't change what had happened. "Just make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else," I told her as the elevator doors opened. Over the next few weeks, things moved surprisingly fast. Roy kept me updated on the internal changes at Meridian. Tolan's entire department was being restructured. Samuel had apparently left in a huff, telling everyone who would listen that he was being unfairly targeted. Nobody seemed particularly upset about his departure. The company hired an outside firm to review all HR practices and policies. They established a new reporting system for harassment claims that bypassed normal management channels. And true to their word, they reached out to former employees who had been forced out after filing complaints. Rebecca Chin called me one evening, sounding excited. "They actually offered me a consulting position," she said, "to help redesign their harassment reporting process. I never thought I'd work with Meridian again, but this feels important. Are you going to take it?" I asked, genuinely curious. I wasn't sure I could go back into that building again, even as a consultant. "I think so," she said after a pause. "It's a chance to fix what broke me. And they're paying an obscene amount of money, which doesn't hurt." I laughed. "Get that corporate guilt money. You earned it. Meanwhile, I was fielding job offers from companies who'd somehow heard about what happened. Nothing had gone public yet, but the corporate world has its own whisper network. I eventually accepted a position with a smaller tech firm that had a woman CEO and a zero-tolerance harassment policy. The pay was less than what Meridian had offered as a settlement, but the environment was worth it. About a month after the board meeting, Meridian released their promise statement. It wasn't the full confession I'd hoped for, but it was more substantial than I expected. They acknowledged systematic failures in addressing workplace harassment and announced a complete overhaul of their reporting procedures. They didn't name names, but they did admit that several executives had been terminated for violations of company ethics. The statement made a small splash in industry publications. A few former employees gave anonymous quotes confirming the toxic culture, but there was no major scandal, no front-page news. Just a company admitting it had erred and promising to do better. In corporate America, that's practically revolutionary. Roy called me after the statement went public. Not bad, he said. Could have been stronger, but it's something. Better than nothing. I agreed. How are things inside? Weird, he admitted. There's this awkward period where everyone's trying to figure out the new normal. Some managers are overcorrecting, afraid to offer any criticism at all. Others are just continuing as before, but with better PR language. Real change takes time, I reminded him. At least the worst offenders are gone. Most of them, he corrected. There are still some Teresa loyalists in middle management. They're keeping their heads down for now, but they're not gone. That didn't surprise me. Systems like this don't change overnight, and there are always people who benefit from the old ways. But at least there was movement in the right direction. A week later, I received an unexpected email from Keith, my former teammate, who had watched silently as Tolan pushed me out. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity prevailed. I should have said something, he wrote. I saw what was happening and stayed quiet because I was afraid for my job. That's not an excuse, just the truth. I'm sorry. The place is different now. Not perfect, but better. Your documentation inspired me to start keeping my own records, just in case. I didn't respond immediately. His apology felt sincere, but it also felt too late. Where was the solidarity when I was being escorted out by security? Still, I eventually wrote back a brief, thanks for reaching out, message, not quite forgiveness, but not burning the bridge either. 3 months after the board meeting, Meridian held a company-wide training on their new harassment policies. Rebecca helped design it, focusing on real scenarios rather than the usual corporate jargon. Roy sent me a recording afterward. This is actually good, he texted. People were engaged. Some even asked questions about gray areas instead of just nodding along. Progress, I replied. Small steps. Around the same time, I received a LinkedIn message from Anna. She'd been promoted to team lead, replacing Samuel. First woman in this position in department history, she wrote. Still a lot of work to do, but doors are opening that were closed before. I was happy for her. Anna had been caught in the same toxic system as the rest of us, trying to survive by keeping her head down. Now she had a chance to help change things from the inside. 6 months after everything went down, I met Roy and Rebecca for drinks at a bar far from the Meridian offices. It was the first time the three of us had been in the same room together, though we'd been in constant contact through texts and calls. Rebecca looked completely different from her LinkedIn photo. She'd cut her hair short and dyed it purple at the tips. Corporate Rebecca is dead, she announced when I commented on it. Consultant Rebecca does whatever she wants. Roy looked better too. The perpetual stress lines around his eyes had softened. He'd started a small cybersecurity firm, using his experience to help companies protect their data and their employees. So, Rebecca said, raising her glass, to taking down the empire. I shook my head. The empire is still standing. We just removed a few bad emperors. Always the optimist, Roy teased. We spent the evening sharing war stories and updates. Rebecca had expanded her consulting beyond Meridian, helping other companies audit their harassment policies. Roy's business was growing, with a focus on ethical tech practices, and I was settling into my new job, cautiously allowing myself to enjoy work again. Have you heard about Mills? Rebecca asked halfway through her second drink. I shook my head. After leaving Meridian, I deliberately stopped following news about my former employers. He's suing the company for wrongful termination, she said with a grim smile. Claims he was made a scapegoat for systemic issues beyond his control. Unbelievable, I muttered. Oh, It gets better, Roy added. Teresa is a star witness. She's claiming the board knew about everything and approved it all. It's like watching two scorpions sting each other. Will it work? I asked. Rebecca shrugged. Doubtful. They have too much documentation against them both. But it's forcing everything into the open. No more quiet settlements and NDAs. It's all going to be part of the public record. That was something, at least. Sunshine is the best disinfectant, as they say. Later that night, walking home slightly buzzed, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a link to a job posting. Meridian was hiring a new VP of Employee Relations, someone to oversee all HR functions, including their new harassment reporting system. The job description emphasized experience with creating ethical workplace cultures and implementing accountability systems. The message below simply read, "You should apply. We need someone who won't back down. Lillian." I saved the number, but didn't respond. There was no way I was going back to Meridian, even in a position of power. When I got home, I forwarded the listing to Rebecca instead. "You'd be perfect for this," I wrote. "Imagine the changes you could make from the inside." She responded almost immediately. "Already applied yesterday. Interview next week. Wish me luck." I smiled and set my phone down. Maybe real change was possible after all. A year after my confrontation with Tolan, I received an invitation to speak at a tech industry conference about creating safer workplaces. Apparently, word had gotten around about what happened at Meridian, despite the company's attempts to keep it quiet. The whisper network at work again. I was nervous about speaking publicly. My voice, the one Tolan had compared to a serial killer's, would be amplified for hundreds of people. But I agreed anyway. Some stories need to be told, even by imperfect messengers. The conference was held in one of those generic hotel ballrooms that could be anywhere in America. The audience was mostly HR professionals and company leaders looking to avoid becoming the next Meridian. Not exactly revolutionary, but at least they were paying attention. I kept my talk simple. No grand statements about changing the world, just practical advice about documentation, building support networks, and recognizing patterns of abuse. I didn't mention Meridian by name, but I didn't have to. Everyone knew why I was there. After my session, a young woman approached me. She looked fresh out of college, still carrying that hopeful energy that corporate America hadn't crushed yet. "I just started my first job," she said, "and my manager keeps taking credit for my ideas. HR says I need to be a team player. What should I do?" I thought about all the advice I wished someone had given me when I started at Meridian. Document everything, find allies, know when to fight, and when to walk away. Start keeping records, I told her. Emails, meeting notes, everything. And look for another job while you're at it. Some cultures can't be fixed from the bottom. She nodded, looking both disappointed and relieved. That's what I thought. I just wanted to be sure I wasn't overreacting. "You're not," I assured her. "Trust your instincts." As she walked away, I spotted a familiar face at the back of the room. Rebecca, now officially the VP of Employee Relations at Meridian, gave me a small wave. Her hair was still purple at the tips, a small rebellion against corporate norms. We met for coffee after my talk. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone doing hard but meaningful work. "How's the empire?" I asked. "Changing," she said slowly. "We've completely rebuilt the HR department. New reporting systems, new training, new people. The old guard hates me, but the board has my back for now." "For now," she shrugged. "Corporate memories are short. In a few years, when this all fades, they might decide I'm too much trouble. But I'm making the most of the time I have." "Any sign of Teresa or Mills?" I couldn't help asking. "Mills lost his lawsuit," she said with a small smile. "And Teresa's consulting for startups now, teaching them how to navigate corporate politics." Can you believe that? I could. People like Teresa always land on their feet. The system is designed to protect them. "What about you?" Rebecca asked. "Any regrets about how it all went down?" I thought about it. The months of stress, the career disruption, the nights spent wondering if I was crazy or if the world was. But also the changes that came after, the people who could work without fear because of what we did. "No regrets," I said finally. "I'd do it all again. Maybe sooner." She nodded, understanding completely. "Same. Though I would have documented even more. You can never have too much evidence." We laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from shared trauma transformed into something like wisdom. As I headed to the airport that evening, I checked my phone one last time. There was an email from Roy with a subject line that made me smile. The serial killer voice strikes again. He attached a news article about another tech company facing a reckoning over harassment issues. The employees had used our Meridian playbook, detailed documentation, collective action, strategic pressure points. No dramatic confrontations or legal battles, just methodical exposure of the truth. It wasn't a perfect victory. The company had issued a carefully worded statement and made some changes to their policies. A few executives had been reassigned, not fired, not publicly shamed, just quietly moved sideways. But it was something, a small shift in the balance of power. I thought about Tolan, about his comment that my voice reminded him of every serial killer who ever lived. He'd meant it as an insult, a way to make me smaller and less threatening. But maybe there was an accidental truth there. Maybe my voice, our voices, were dangerous to people like him. Maybe they should be afraid when we speak. As my plane took off, I drafted a quick reply to Roy, good. May they all be terrified when we open our mouths. Then I put my phone away and closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to enjoy the momentary peace. Tomorrow, there would be more work to do, more systems to change, more voices to amplify. But for now, this was enough, knowing that somewhere, someone was using what we'd learned to fight their own battles, not with dramatic gestures or grand confrontations, but with quiet, persistent truth.